Okay. So hi everyone, and a warm welcome to the Being Black in Publishing Forum. I'm Leila Mohammed. I'm an editor at Kasara Republic, and I'll be moderating this panel on digital marketing and promotion. Being Black in Publishing. Sorry, one moment. So the Being Black for Publishing Forum is a Kasara Republic initiative designed to connect seasoned Black publishing professionals from across the world with aspiring young African and Afro-diaspora individuals interested in finding out about a career in publishing. It's a month-long program, and it provides participants with invaluable insights, skills, networks, and the guidance needed to break into the publishing industry from experts. Our previous panels have taken us through the process of producing a book, from getting it in front of publishers as a literary agent, to the editorial process and the design and layout of a book, and the various job roles that these involve. If you're unable to join us for any of these previous panels, no worries, they're on our YouTube channel, and they're also linked on our website as well. So today we're continuing the forum with a book promotion and digital marketing panel with an exciting lineup of speakers I'll introduce to you in a little bit. But before I introduce them, I'd like to share a few housekeeping points. First of all, as this is being recorded, can you ever make sure they're muted throughout the meeting? We also welcome you to join the conversation in the chat and on social media. So please use the hashtag #BeingBlackInPublishing and tag us, Kasara Republic. We will be taking questions towards the end of the session, so please put them into the chat as you think of them. And as part of the program, young people based in Nigeria can apply for a 3-month internship program starting in January 2024 as a way to experience world of publishing firsthand. The internship program will provide young publishing professionals with the opportunity to gain hands-on experience in various aspects of the industry, including editorial, publicity, marketing, and sales. Applications are now open, and successful applicants will be announced in December, so please head to our website for more information and how to apply. That being said, let's get started with this session. So marketing and promotion is a really important part of getting books in front of you and actually bringing in the money. So things we talked about before, my kind of cost centers, we're acquiring books, but now you're the ones that kind of make the books sell, hopefully, and get them in front of people. Nikki is a campaigns manager working in publishing, where she has shaped and delivered brand strategy and campaigns. Currently, she's at Jacaranda Books. Moa is a second-year graduate student of speech-language pathology. As a book talk bookstagrammer creator, Moa focuses on promoting the works of marginalized authors, specifically Black authors. And Rhoda has over 8 years experience in marketing and strategic communications across various industries, including hospitality, travel, and publishing, and is a marketing content officer at Kasara Republic Press. So I'd like you to all take some time to introduce yourselves and the path that you took into publishing. What inspired you to pursue a career or to get involved in promoting books like you did, Moa? And can you share your journey into this path? So Nikki, if you want to go first, and then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining this session. I'm really excited to be here and speak about my role in campaigns and publishing. What inspired me to pursue a career in publishing? I was always an avid reader who definitely wanted to avoid working in publishing. However, I think the things you love eventually call you to them. So while working outside of publishing, always found myself working in some ways within the publishing world. So I'd work on, in conversations with authors, or find myself working as a volunteer at literary festivals and helping organize festivals. So eventually I found that because I loved literature so much, I was coming to it regardless of what I was doing in my 9 to 5. And my ideas for what were possible were constantly growing in my mind. It felt like a very organic sort of, oh, I wonder if this could happen or that could happen. What if this author did that? Or what if, this space did that? And because it felt very organic to, who I was, and because it was, it felt like the passion and what I was learning and, the other side of my 9 to 5 were just marrying each other so well. I, eventually found myself just looking into more publishing roles and looking for ways to work in publishing that I think I originally always thought was very editorial. So I never really thought about marketing and publishing as, a career, not because I didn't know it existed, but because I think people think about publishing, mostly think about the editorial side of things. But I thought these are creative ways of helping a story be retold to new audiences. And this is a job that you not just can do, but want to do. And so I found myself drawn to publishing and moving away from more of the tech world. And eventually, I think I've now been in publishing for officially for over 4 years, but I think I probably have an 8-year career in publishing. That was, a lot of me just throwing myself into spaces and learning and doing ad hoc work and doing loads of free work and letting passion dictate how I approach publishing industry overall. So yeah.
Great. I think passion is definitely a driver for many people in the publishing industry across all the different sectors. And you probably hear that a lot throughout this session, this program. Moa, if you want to go next.
Yes, I can definitely go next, and so happy to be here. I am on like a different side of marketing and publishing, doing social media work on Book Talk, Instagram, Twitter, wherever. And I think similar to Nikki's, like just starting off loving books, always been a reader, always loved literature. And then when I started getting into reading again, properly, like at the end of like 2021, beginning of 2022, and then deciding like, oh, actually, like I want to find more books from other like people that look like me, Black people, specifically like African authors. And I was like, like I used to be on BookTube when I was younger. I'd watch a lot of videos there, and I was like, what's like people like where people getting book recs from these days? And it's like TikTok. So then it still took a while to like find other like Black people and find Black books, because like it's there. We just need to find them. And that's the big thing about marketing, is like getting you to find what you're looking for. So I ended up finding a bunch of other Black creators. And then I was like, I also can talk about the things that I like on this platform. So that's how I got started. And over time, it just became more evident to me that I want to keep doing this, because I want other people to find the books written by our people in the way that it's not pushed in the mainstream, because of how like publishing doesn't really like put our voices at the forefront. So I think that's what really got me. Oh, my TikTok account, I'll put it in the chat because it has like full stops inside. But that's how I got into the publishing world again, and like literature again, just by wanting to tell people about the authors that I'm enjoying so we can support our own people.
Great, thank you. And I think we say about kind of identifying a gap and then seeing how can I step up and fill that is a really important way we can all look at jobs when we're first entering industries. So that's really good insight. Thank you. Rhoda, please introduce yourself.
Yes, sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Rhoda, and I am the marketing officer at Cassava Republic Press. Great to be here. So for me, I landed in publishing by chance, actually. I did not see it anywhere in my future, but I don't know, as fate will have it, I'm here. I got this role through my network. A very good friend had told me about the opportunity and asked if I'll be interested. And I said, why not? Because I've always been a reader. I've always loved books. My parents introduced me to reading as a child. I read as a teenager. Literature was my favorite subject in school. I did it with ease. And I've always been reading. In 2017, I discovered Bookstagram and completely turned my, what should I call it, my reading around, introduced me to a lot more people that are like-minded online. So it was actually where I met this friend. So it has been an interesting journey. And for me, it was an opportunity to merge my love for reading and books together with my career. So I said, why not give it a shot? And here we are.
Here we are. Thank you, Rhoda. And I think it's good to know that you can come from a different marketing background and still find your way into publishing. A lot of people assume, you're English and you have this very straight route to publishing, but actually having these various experiences can be really helpful. And the time point through all of your directions is that passion and love of books, which I think you can't really do without if you're going to work in publishing. So I think, Moa, you kind of touched on this a bit, but I do want to ask each of you about why you think we need more Black professionals or Black people in that book promotion and digital marketing space. Why is it so important? This our program set up as being Black in publishing because we want to encourage more Black people to enter that profession. So why do you think that's important?
I'll start off. I think, like I briefly mentioned, I think it's super important because if we're not here to tell our stories and if we're not here to like fight for our stories, it's very easy for people to exclude us. It's very easy for people to not pay attention to us. And I think what publishing is very, very white. And even like growing up, like a lot of the stories, like I read Enid Blyton, like that was what my mom brought to the house, like Famous 5, Secret 7, like, and Nigerian authors, even though grew up in Lagos, like it wasn't as big because like that's what she'll just find whenever she goes shopping, like, or it's like if it's the Nigerian books, it's like things I've read over time and time again. So, and things that you can't tell me that people are not writing stories or Nigerians don't have things to say. It's just the way the system works. And like, as you mentioned before, like the other panels about getting the book made, and it's expensive. So just having people that want to bet on other Nigerian, Black, diasporic authors being like, I would invest in you and I'll get your stories out, and I'll put the marketing people to let people know about what you've written. I think it's very important, and it's super, and it always works best when it's people who care. And most of the time, it's only people like us that would care to go that extra mile. So that's why I think it's super important that this is like going on to expose more people and to get more people involved in publishing, because we really need it.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with, what Mo said in terms of the amplification of the writing that exists from Black people. It's very important that, we are a part of that machine, and I will call publishing, a machine. I think the more time, you spend in it, you learn about this machine that's not just about the individual publisher, but it's about, how the books are distributed and who they get to. And what you realize as someone who works, in marketing, the strategic part of marketing is, you work very closely with so many other departments. And I think I'll say this about, being a marketeer, it's a very, very interesting role that reveals itself to be so much more than you think it's going to be, because you have to start paying attention to not just, I'm marketing a book to a place, but is the book able to get there? And in order for books to exist in places, there has to be demand, and you're creating a demand for a book to eventually be supplied in a place. So you're not just doing a work of letting a book be known to a place, you're doing work of getting books to be demanded in spaces, or to be able to exist in spaces. So I work from, the UK, so I work from the West, and you think about authors, writing, trying to have their books exist back home or having their books exist in the West, and you think about all the channels that exist for that book to happen, for that book to exist, for audiences, at home and the diaspora. And it's like, I can use TikTok, for instance, as a global tool, like Moa uses, to be like, everyone needs to read this book, that book needs to happen in this space. And as a marketer, you're like, okay, I need to create opportunities that people that are seeing this on TikTok are not just people in the UK. How do I make sure I'm advertising this book so that someone in Nigeria understands this book from that perspective? So I think Black people need to exist because we have a way to speak to different audiences in different ways, and we're able to break down our own books and our own stories so that people understand how they see themselves in those books. Because there is a way that a publisher in the West will advertise the book, and there's a way that we will do it ourselves, and it breaks it down for such a vast audience. It breaks it down in such a way that people are able to relate to it from so many different angles. And I think beyond that, we need to exist within publishing, because the structure of publishing needs like decolonization. It needs to understand that there's multiple ways for stories to exist, and there's multiple ways for stories to be spread. And there is such a structural existence, I guess, of the business of publishing, and we come in and we really disrupt something that's, that's operates in a very singular way. And I can go into that, but that then becomes like a very business talk. But we really disrupt it by existing in, because we want stories to exist, as chapbooks, want stories to exist in cheaper formats. We're combating the way books are produced, the way they're marketed, what's spent, because we're thinking about books existing not just for the person who can pay £30 for a book, or someone who wants to pay like 25 naira. All those people deserve to have access to literature. And when we exist in these spaces, we're really breaking down this idea that books are an elitist, thing, or books are a luxury. We really break that down because we see the spectrum of who deserves to have access to books. And I think marketing also really does that, because we market the audiobook, we market the ebook, we market the physical book, we market the author, and then we market the events, and we create events that are accessible. So marketing does so much because it touches so many different ways in which people can access books. And books are one of the major problems, or one of the major issues of books is an access issue, not just the existence. The books exist, how can we get them accessed by the people who demand them? It's a very long rambly answer, but yes, I'm very passionate about what marketing can do for growing people's ability to access books. So, yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think that's really good. I think what you research on there is that as digital marketing, you decide who the audience of a book is, because that's who you then choose to target. So I think when you have a room of maybe white people in the West deciding who the audience is, they're not necessarily thinking of readers in these other territories or even Black readers in the West as a potential audience, and they're missing out. So having people who can say, actually, I know who else would like to read it. Here's a whole untouched segment to tap into is really important. So I think thanks for highlighting that there. Rhoda, anything to add?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I agree with everything that has been said. I cannot emphasize how important it is for Black people to be in publishing. One, simply because we deserve. I mean, I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be there. There are people that have the competence to be in this position, so why not? But also, secondly, I think the primary role of the marketer is to tell the story of the product or the service, right? In a way that would convince the buyer and win them over. And that storytelling for me is rooted in the framing of the messaging of the book. We simply need more people we need more Black people in publishing, because it is important how these stories are framed. Like, too many times we've seen like Black people write books and it is received in a way, or the messaging of the book goes out in a way that you can tell that it wasn't handled with care. So when people that are indigenous to the stories and these authors where the stories are rooted from are able to tell the story, it makes room for the book to be received in a way that it should be, in any way that it deserves.
Perfectly said. Thank you, Rhoda. I really like the idea of talking about promotion marketing as a storytelling tool as well. So maybe we can get into that more as it goes along. So I think that's what we've touched on briefly on with Mo as a TikToker and the talk of BookTube, Bookstagram, BookTok. So how have digital marketing strategies evolved in the publishing world in recent years, with these different platforms rising up? And how do you stay on top of these changes as somebody in that space?
That's like I think that's a very loaded question, especially with like TikTok in particular, which like the trends are always coming, and to be at like top of the trend or like to market whatever book or idea you want to market, like you have to be on it. So I think one huge way is like you also have to be a consumer of whatever platform that you're on. Because if you try and like I'm just gonna pop in and post, I'm just gonna like observe, like by the time you post the idea that you've heard about on like other platforms, like the time has gone. Like the trend has died and you're just getting the dread. So you definitely have to be very like ear to the ground for whatever it is, like whatever platform that you're doing your digital marketing on. At least that's what I would say for like the TikTok sphere. And even Bookstagram is kind of better because of how Instagram works. But overall, like still stay on top of it. Just stay on top of it and make sure that you are keeping involved in whatever sphere you're in.
I'd answer that to say, I mean, there are disruptors, like TikTok and Instagram and YouTube, which have really democratized what we are accessing as literature, because, I think we're seeing things like romance and horror and speculative fiction have moments, and it's really challenged, what is considered literature. Particularly because, again, as Black people, we don't write, of necessity to the norm. You have a writer like Irena Stenokodia who writes speculative fiction, and her Nudie Brank did so well on Bookstagram, and that sort of literature would generally not be championed by the mainstream. But because readers said, no, this is different, this is exciting, this is challenging, it might not read in the easy linear form that we think literature is supposed to be, but because Black writers aren't always writing to the tradition, people then paid attention to a book like that. And that's really great for as a marketer, because you can say, I know this book will work for you. Like if I go to like The Guardian, if I go to the traditional sources, they might not understand this book. But if I take this book to the reader will then call out that this needs more attention. And so bringing the reader into the marketing conversation has been really, really interesting for challenging how we market and what we can do with that marketing. But I'd also say overall, like digital marketing has changed in terms of like there are no limits. And I think the internet has really taken away a lot of the limits of what we can do. So we're able to create like podcasts in accordance with books now. And so that way, if someone who generally would not be a reader hears the podcast, they hear the voice of the author telling you the story from a different angle. And that way they're like, oh, actually, this is really interesting. So like with Cassava Republic and Female Fear Factory, the podcast series was so interesting because it's 15-minute episodes, of the author in conversation or people telling their own stories. And doing something like that really brings people in a different way to a book that's nonfiction. It creates a human connection to nonfiction. And you can do that now because you say, this is a product, but I want you to experience it from this other human perspective and then come back to the book. So we can decenter the book first in our digital marketing, but the book is still the product we're selling. We're just creating a different way for someone to access that. With a book we published this year, Finding Home, we created a short film that premiered at Bradford Lit Festival. And in the past, you wouldn't think, oh, we're going to create a film first to promote a book, but we're able to do these very different things because we're thinking differently about how tech enables how we communicate with people, but also able to think about access, like people that don't, that might not be able to read first and they're going to wait for the audiobook that might come a year later. But if they have the film, at least I get a sense of what the book is now. If they have the podcast, they have a sense of what the book is now. So they can wait for that audiobook or they can wait for the ebook and they can spend time getting to know the book before the book even arrives in different ways. So I think overall, the internet, but also our access to creating content in our own ways and our access to democratized platforms has really challenged what we're able to do. And has also challenged, again, the idea of what the book is and who has access to the book.
Rhoda, do you want to add anything for me?
Yeah, so for me, I do traditional marketing as well. And just comparing both, right, I would say digital marketing is what stresses me out the most. Not stress, but keeps me on my toes because the platforms are evolving every 2 business days and just keeping up to date with what is new. Who knows what algorithm strategy Instagram is going to put out next, So it's really challenging to be on your toes that way because I feel like everything at the end of the day is a gamble. So you can post 5 times a day or 5 times a week or whatever, and it does well today. But the next week, you just don't know. So it's really challenging. It's quite daunting. But we're witnessing in real time how these platforms are evolving. We mentioned BookTok. It's almost impossible for you to be in publishing now and not have a presence on TikTok of some sort, or at least engage with users on there. These platforms have also fed into people's interests. So a lot of what is trending or what a few people talk about can just take up steam, Sometimes books that have been published and long forgotten, 5 years later or 2 years later, someone makes a passionate review about it and everyone is talking about it, and then its sales just drives up. So it's really challenging to keep up with all of it, but we're doing what we have to do. For me personally, I stay on top of things by following creators. I feel like they're the ones that are very keen on what is new on these platforms, right? There are people that have dedicated their time to studying what is coming up new on Instagram, being in touch with the platform itself directly. So from these people, I'm able to see what is trending, some of the tools, the strategies you can use to gain visibility on these platforms. So that's how I stay on top, basically.
Right, yeah, I think you all touched on that idea of democratizing the scene, right? So traditionally in publishing, you have the sales team, marketing team that go out specific places like Guardian and these very traditional presses and try to get publicity through the same routes. But now as more of these individual places come up and people like Moa who aren't affiliated with publishers are doing the work just naturally through that passion of promoting these books, publishers are having to kind of scramble to keep up. So I think as we see more and more younger people getting into the industry who've maybe grown up in these spaces, it'll be very interesting to see how that evolves and changes things. So we talked about kind of being on these platforms to keep an eye on the content creators, but do you think that people who are trying to aspiring marketing people who want to get into the industry, do you think it's important for them to have an online presence to be out there creating and showing recruiters, that they can do these things, or do you think that's not a necessity? Nikki and Rhoda, maybe you can say that first.
I think yes and no. So I think there is the pressure to be online and to also be producing. I think it's understanding what kind of digital marketeer, what kind of book promoter you're going to be. And I think not everyone, depending on the capacity you're, is going to have to be the person that's on TikTok. You might be the person who is more conceptual than visually creative. And I think it's very important for people to identify what their skill set is. And you might eventually grow into, the person that's, a lot more visual and can operate on these platforms. But I think if you're someone that's conceptual, maybe starting off by partnering with maybe a friend or something who is more of a execute on these channels and saying, I have ideas, let's see if the execution works. Can I communicate ideas to an executor? Because some of the work you do, a digital marketer will be, you know, pitching to someone like a Mo and saying, we have this book, this is the campaign idea we have, how can you execute it for us? So I think people should not always feel the pressure to be everything. And I think that overwhelming pressure is something I think people are feeling these days, to be like, I need to be on Bookstagram, I need to be able to film videos, I need to be able to make reels, I need to be able to make, and you don't have to do all those things. You need to give yourself the scope to grow. I think it's understanding your initial pull to the industry and your initial skill set and saying, I have this, how can I grow this? And from this thing, how can I go the next and the next and the next? And past that, you know, you can go to, I'm keeping on top, touching back on that is, you know, I'm going to read email marketing around publishing and marketing. I'm going to go to a few sessions online. I'm going to reach out to someone that I know is doing well and say, can I, you know, get some advice on this? But I think the online presence thing, because I'm someone who really struggles with that, but I'm very much conceptual and I can give it over to someone. I can't do the physical social media thing, but I've been able, you know, through growing to produce a film, produce podcasts, produce events, and those things I'm stronger at than being online. And I've had to understand that and be like, you know what, social media is something I can just pitch into, but not produce on. And letting go of the things you're not strong at to grow things you might be stronger at is really important. And I think people need to give themselves grace to know that you might exist in the digital age, but you don't have to use every single form of media in order to be successful in your career. It's highlighting where you're strongest and highlighting where you're weakest and navigating those in partnership with everyone else around you. That's really going to sustain you in the industry. And yeah, you need to keep on top of trends, but you don't need to always be in trends. And it's a very hard balance to strike, but it is possible, you know, to be successful in the industry.
Right, I think there is the idea of the whole master of all trades, you know, jack of all trades, master of none. So you don't necessarily, if you know that's your weakness, but you're putting all your energy to that because you think arbitrarily someone might prefer that, then you might just let it down your actual strengths instead. So that's a really good point. And I think that pressure, especially when you're looking for your first job, can be quite high. So yeah, I think that's really well said. Thank you. Rhoda?
Yes, so I agree with Nikki. I think it is yes and no. You need to ask yourself why you're using the platform and how you're going to use it. Yes, because it can be a way to sell your skills and put yourself out there. As someone who has benefited from my network, you know, just by maintaining my Bookstagram account, I think it can be beneficial in that way. But also in my role now, right, we're based in Nigeria and we feed to our source markets in different parts of Africa and also Europe. I'm not able to connect with people that I think will play a role in promoting the books, like media, like Bookstagram, like book talks. So having a social media presence and just being active on there, relatively active, plays a very big role in introducing me and the company and the book. You know, people I reach out to, sometimes just putting a face to the name or to the email that you're sending makes a huge difference. You're able to build connections, you're able to grow your networks. How else will you find people and send pictures to them, right, if you don't maintain a social media presence? So I think it's about asking yourself why you're on social media and how you're going to use it to benefit you.
That's a great point, Rhoda. I think, yeah, showing that you have that passion for books. One way of doing that can be seeing, look how active I am in the community of books, and that can be in the digital space. But again, if you're a more physical person, going to events in your area, going to bookshop talks and being around publishing that way can also be a great alternative as well. Well, I'm not sure if you have anything to add, just because obviously you're not working in. Okay, great. Move on to the next one. So,
sorry,
you'll share. Sorry, Nikki,
I think someone's asked what kind of digital marketer I am, and I don't know if I want to answer that now or give space for that.
Do you want to take? You can take that now if you want.
Yeah, because I just thought, as Layla mentioned at the start, I'm a campaigns manager, which means I work across like a wide range of the marketing team, which would be like digital marketers, like events, partners. So I have to be abreast of what goes on digital marketing because I am the person who informs how every strategy for every book feeds out. So I'm trying to explain this in a, so I basically create the strategy for the book and then speak to the teams responsible and say, do you think this will work for your channels? And then we work together to amend and adapt. But I have to make decisions on what what weight we give to each channel for each book, and that is like dependent on either like budget or where we think a book will work best. So like for YA books, we might say we're going to go more to like local libraries and spend more of our spend there. And then for a book like historical fiction, which we know does well on digital marketing, I'll say we need to work on digital marketing strategy for this, and we sit down together and we build that strategy and we allocate spend. So my role is a bit more overarching because I have to work across every single facet of like marketing and inform that, but I have to be very informed, but also I have to be informed by the team. So in a sense, I'm both like the expert and the learner, and I have to make sure I keep that duality across like my wider role. I hope that does answer the question.
Great. I think, yeah, I mean, so I think what you also addressing there is that adaptability is so core to a job in digital marketing space, like partly because of all these new things coming up, but because it does touch on the physical world and partnerships. You know, podcast, you mentioned podcast before, as something that, you know, 10 years ago no one would consider tying that to books. So we never know what the next thing we can latch onto and expand is on. There's always this fear, oh, people aren't going to be reading, people's attention spans are decreasing because of TikTok, and then you have the thriving BookTok community that kind of contradicts that. So how can we use these new changes to the favor of book publishing? You know, and that's, I think, so a really important asset to have as someone who wants to work in that space, is just being able to adapt and keep up with the changing of things and be very on top of things in that sense. So I think that was good to touch on there, Nikki. So I think if you could share a particularly challenging book marketing campaign that you've been involved in. So what strategies and tactics you used to overcome those challenges? Well, in your case, there a book that you've been promoting on your TikTok, or BookTok or Instagram that you've noticed the struggle with how you push it, and anything you have to make changes you have to make on your strategy in that regard. So yeah, I'll open it up to the floor.
I can go first. I think with every campaign, right, it can be challenging to predict how it will be received. You can do everything right. You can have a very robust plan, do what you need to do, put it out there, and then no one is talking about the book. No one is even checking. No one cares, you know. But it's important to stay motivated if this happens. I also think it is important to be flexible with your plan. For example, for me, one of the most challenging campaigns we've had was actually recent, very recent, a book that came out last month. Prior to the release, like 5 months before, I'd sent out an announcement that this book is coming out. No one showed interest, no one was checking for it, but just doing something like tweaking the body of the email, tweaking the subject line alone made a huge difference. As opposed to saying forthcoming book and the name of the title, you can have like themes around the book, just something that will spark interest, you know. So that was a challenge, and that was how I overcame it. So it's important to be flexible with whatever you're doing, because you never know how it's going to be received. But even also recently, we published 2 queer titles in Nigeria: Love Offers No Safety, Nigeria's Queer Men Speak, and then He Sang a Lullaby by debut author Annie Kayode Somtochukwu. Both very great titles, exciting, but because of the nature of Nigeria and how queer people are treated, how the LGBTQ community is treated with stringent laws, in fact, is a title that you have to be careful with the messaging, have to be careful with how you go about speaking about it. But we took on it with a lot of confidence, and we went out with it because, I mean, these are stories that have to be told. These are voices that we have to amplify. So we went about it as we planned to, and both of these books did well. People were talking about them. We had an entire launch for Love Offers No Safety, as well as And Then He Sang a Lullaby. We also engaged like reviewers online, sent them book boxes with personalized bookmarks. So the titles were both very received, and people are still talking about them.
Great. I think you bring a really important point about politically sensitive books, and how, again, as digital marketers, you need to be careful in the different, you know, if you're doing different territories as well. So you might have to market the books differently according to the audience, all those territories. And then that point about tweaking the email. So I think, you know, you talk about storytelling in promotion. I think there's so many different stories you can take out of any one book. So knowing what to pull out specifically for each audience as well is really important tool of digital marketing that you addressed there. Thank you. Nikki, anything to add?
Yeah, I think the theme of sort of politically, you know, sensitive books are always quite interesting, because maybe personally for me, I think those are the books I love so much, the books that, you know, really like take us to a place and show us like the narrative history. And I think sometimes you can love a book so much, you're very, you know, you're very blinded and you're very like, no, like, I know this is like the way to market this book. And sometimes you need to create an objectivity between yourself and a book, which can be quite hard. And I guess that's sort of where the role of, you know, the Bookstagrammer and the reviewer and making sure you're reaching other people so they give you a new narrative for a book. And I think, you know, part of, as Rhoda said, part of the job of marketing is adaptability, saying like, this is my plan and I followed it through, but also after I followed it through, what has the result been? And then what am I learning from this? How am I adapting my learning? And I was saying to a friend the other day that given that I ran away from any sort of math and any sort of stats, and I have like 2 literature degrees, I've looked at so many tables and looked at so many numbers in the last year and I ever thought I would in my job. And so there's a lot of sort of number assessment and, you know, looking at things like, you know, the trackability of links, has this worked? And you're looking at so much more data sets than you ever think possible, because, you know, after you run a Facebook or Instagram ad, as Rhoda will know, like you have to look at how it performed, where did it perform? And if I do something called like an A/B testing, where I put, you know, quite similar assets of the same books, but different messaging, which one performed better? Why did it perform better? Did I send one to a different type of audience? And what audience was that? Is the audience I assume that would buy into this book the audience that is buying into this book? You're constantly making decisions based on data. So it becomes a lot less, you know, this creative, like, oh, I'm more like, actually, I need to sit down and actually review how the creative has worked against the metrics. And I think a book that, you know, has really done that challenge for me is a book we produced this year called Go Season. And it's a book set in Sudan. And again, that's a very politically charged book. And our assumption was, because of what's going on politically in Sudan right now, this is a really hot book on the market. It's going to really do well with, you know, readers. People are going to want to buy into this. And I think in that sense, it's also made a assumption that the audience is only going to buy into this book from the political aspect, because the political aspect was very hot on the market. But there's so many other layers to the book that we've then had to revisit and pull out and reshape and move like past the campaign to really get that connection. But because we saw the political connections as the most obvious things, we used that very heavily. But that's not actually why people would buy into this book. Part of it is, you know, the author as a debut author, and, you know, the author's personal story. Drawing on that more has really changed how people receive the book. Thinking about the ideas of, you know, how race continues to operate in Northern Africa, something we weren't thinking about, has challenged how the book is being able to be received. So it's that sort of adaptability, but also listening back to what's going on when you put a message out there. And I'd say that. So, you know, that book has been a challenge, but revisiting it and bring it back. And I think it's very key not to give up on a book that, you know, doesn't do well for like 6 months can suddenly change completely how it's doing in the next 6 months. And I think there's always a story to tell about a book. Because you haven't seen it in that first run of the book doesn't mean you can't go back and be objective again in 6 months and say, actually, I think we forgot this audience in pushing this book. Let's take it there and see what that happens. So there is, you know, it's very hard to be, what's the word I think used to be motivated sometimes when a book hasn't performed, especially when you love it, when you're like, this is such a good book. But I think being patient and staying the course of a book, because books do not have debut lifetimes. They have an entire lifetime. I think it's very important for us as Black people to think of our books as having an entire lifetime. They don't always need to be the book that sells, you know, in the first week. They need to be a book that sells in the lifetime, because our archive of books are still being created. And part of our job as marketers is keeping our books in rotation, not just in the moment, but in the long term. So we should always be thinking about our books and saying, you know, in 2 years' time, you can think back to a book you worked on 2 years ago and say, actually, I think this will work for this festival, or this author can come back to this, and you can reignite a new audience for that book. So if a book hasn't worked in the short term, I think always be aware that there is another story for it, and you're part of that story of that book, and do not be discouraged by the first either failures or successes, because we are creating our long-term archive, and it's our job to always be bringing them back to the forefront of storytelling. So I'd say that.
That's amazing, you said, Nikki. I completely agree. And I think what you touched on there is having that perseverance. So it's going to be a lot of sending emails out into the void and not getting responses. You know, I've spoken to a lot of people working in PR and marketing who are just quite weighed down sometimes by that, because we all believe in these books so strongly. We don't choose to invest this money and publish books if we don't believe in them. But you can never know how they're going to get received by market. So I think the idea of persevering with the book and continuing to find different ways, you know, you always have these days on social media, national whatever awareness day, you know, but there's always excuses to just bring things back into the forefront. So being able to use whatever angle you can to keep these things alive is really important. And as Dick said, specifically for Black books that, you know, we don't have this massive archive we can draw on, this canon, and we haven't been accepted in this literary canon per se. So it's important that we believe in them, keep them going. Moa, you're somebody who does champion those kind of books, so maybe you your experience.
Yeah, I think like everything that has been said is very true. Like knowing the audience for specific books and just using like different avenues. So depending on like book genre and different things, you can do like different things in a video or in a post, in a reel. So those different things tell like, and also like has been said before, that social media is very volatile. Like you don't know, like even though you've done a post like this that's worked 10 times, the 11th time it might not work, which is unfortunate. But also sometimes like I see people leave comments on videos that were like way older that I thought, oh, well, that video failed. And then months later, people are like commenting and engaging. So you never know. And I'll always say like for each book, like just perseverance and championing the book and just make sure like you are believing in the story and putting things out there, because you never know when like the sun will shine on that book or that genre or that theme again. Like even right now, because of like certain movies, like some books that like 10 years ago, they're coming back and, you know, everything's coming back. So I would just say like, definitely like know the audience and try and like speak to that, because that's the most important thing. And no book is only for one specific audience. So always like keep in mind, like, how can we target different people? And like with like TikTok, some people like very dramatic things. Like if you're like crying on camera, that is that is a big way to get people to be invested in the story. And everything is storytelling. So how can you get people to be invested in the story that you are showing them, that you are so passionately invested in as well? So yeah, it's very hit or miss. You don't know what's going to work. You can just, what you can do is put your best foot forward and show you care. And even though you might not get like 500 people, you would at least get like one person who will care the same. And I think that helps keep momentum going, because word of mouth is very big in book sales and book publishing.
Yes, definitely. Word of mouth has now become word of social media, you know, so that's really important. I really like what you said about everything is storytelling, which I think that's something we addressed earlier. That's a really great way of putting it, so thank you. I think that all leads nicely into an audience question we had. So it's a two-part question. Is it enough for the book to just be good? I'll say straight away, unfortunately, no, it's not. I think we can all think of books that have taken off, and then we're all thinking, why have they? And then amazing books that aren't getting attention. And does it make publishing easier if the author's personality is more outgoing and willing to engage in these new forms of marketing? So how much does author presence play into digital marketing? Which I think is a really great question. So I'll leave that to you.
Rhoda, do you want to go first?
Okay, I can. So every time we sign on a new book and we are preparing towards the release, we have a meeting with the author, Leila and I. And something we say like 50 times in that meeting is, please have a social media presence. Please engage with your book. Talk about your book. It is your baby, you know, it's your product. There's no one that is going to champion your book better than you will, because it is something that you birth. It is your sweat. And we've seen many times how readers are more engaged with books that authors are championing themselves. Like even for me as a reader, there's a Vietnamese author that I read her book, and just seeing her engage with people just makes me very excited, you know. She even commented on one of my posts where I reviewed her book, and I was so excited, just that little thing, you know. But yes, authors, please engage with your book, talk about it, let people know that your book is coming out, and we make it easier for them by sharing templates. So just having a good product, I mean, and this is not unique to publishing, I would say, any product as all in any industry, just talking about it and championing it from a place of passion does goes a very long way in just boosting the title.
So like in part, like I support what Rhoda says in the sense of like, you know, it really helps if an author has like this personality. But I think a lot of people are shy about or uncomfortable with social media because they think there's a certain personality portrayal that is an author identity. And I had a conversation with one of my authors being like, okay, they were very concerned about, you know, their author picture being like, I don't know if it's an author picture enough. And I asked them, what kind of author do you want to be? Like, and they were like, oh, no one's ever asked me that, because for them, it's like being an author means your author picture has to be like, you know, that sort of frame thing you pose, you have to be. And I was like, but you're not that person. That's not like, I was like, I sit with you and, you know, you're the kind of person who, and I say she's an author in her 70s, so she goes dancing till 4 a.m. in the morning. So I was like, you're not that person. So we can't present this sort of sedate idea of an author for social media. And I think they struggle to marry, you know, like how do I present this person because I want to exist in the literary world. And again, it comes like to being Black in the literary world. The idea of who an author is not always who we are, because you know, we are a bit more vivacious sometimes, or you know, we're a bit more. Also, even if you're reserved, that can be your, you know, who you are. And I think people do struggle with that. So one thing I do try to do is look at where an author flourishes. So I have an author who's actually they're very vocal on Twitter, and they're really great with the Twitter, but if I put them in front of a room of 200 people, they just cannot function. So you get this Twitter personality that doesn't show up when they're like, if they're in a massive room. But if I take them to like a school and they're with like 20 students, their personality completely transforms. So I think, you know, the work has then been like, I need you to be present on social media in a way that you're comfortable with. So Twitter is comfortable for them, but not Instagram. So okay, that works. But then I then have to take that personality and put it in a place that it flourishes, because what you then don't want to happen is, you know, people see your presence in social media and doesn't translate in real life. And then there's then a conversation that comes back to social media that actually I met this author and they're not who they say they are on social media. And there's always an interesting balance. So I think it's finding the platform that your author will thrive on. So it might not be Instagram, it might be Twitter. Twitter is not the best for sales conversions. I will say this to everyone. And unfortunately, since Elon took over, absolutely awful. However, for them, it's where they audience build, is where they build community. And from that, they've started a newsletter, and they can then talk directly to the audience they're building on Twitter. And email conversion is a lot better because, you know, people feel like they're more in connection with a more personal voice on Twitter. And you can also track, you know, where your sales are coming from. So if they put a link to a book or an event, we can track that it's come to their newsletter. And that has managed to work for them. Some authors do better on Instagram, and you know, they're great at the posting. They post a day in their life. They post about their book, and they're able to capture what they feel, you know, fits with the aesthetic of things. And some authors do really well on TikTok because they don't just talk about their book, but they're able to draw themes in their book. So it's really understanding who that author is and then being able to place them in certain places. So I think it's understanding kind of author you are, understanding where you're comfortable in this social media world, and really building on that. As I said, again, you don't have to have every skill because things are always evolving. You just have to find where you're comfortable, but also find your authenticity and that comfortability so that your presence online and in person really match. And about if a book has to be good, I think it's very subjective. You know, there are books you hate and someone loves. And I think it's just about finding the right publisher that champions your book. As long as your publishing house and the person working on your book loves your book, you're in good hands. Your book is good because you believe in it. Your book is good because it's in a place that believes in it. And that's very important to your journey. So good or bad books, I'm not going to, you know, ever say anyone's written a bad book, you know, because, but I think it's finding, you know, believing in your book and finding the right home for your book are very important.
Basically, you're kinder about books than I am, I guess. I think another thing to add on is about the different platforms authors are comfortable with is also quite genre specific. So things like crime or romance, they're very community led, and the authors are very much upfront, and the readers therefore expect to have, and YA too, I think readers expect to have a bit of a relationship with the author, whereas a literary fiction author can have that kind of removed, I'm not really involved personality, and that can work. So there is a sense of genre expectation as well. And then Moa, do you ever work with authors? And obviously also TikTok, Bookstagram, BookTok, they have their own community of passion that's completely without the author as well. So how does that work for you?
So yeah, sometimes, and I think like Rhoda was saying, like sometimes the authors will interact with you and that feels great. And that's when you can like start building like relationships with the authors and possibly working with them for like other upcoming releases. But the TikTok and like Bookstagram space is different because like some authors are not like super great at like TikTok. Like they don't like being in front of a camera is weird. Like your job is to write and do those things. So what social media does is it helps people champion your book for you, which I think is great. And some authors, like some authors that I love, I don't even know what they look like because you don't need that all the time. So I think like Nikki was saying, it's very dependent on like the author and the person, like, and as you were saying, like genre dependent. So I know a lot of romance authors are very forefront, especially like in the independent, like romance, like space. There are people that we know more often and their personality does help like share their books, but they also have like a lot of readers who share that same enthusiasm. While literary fiction authors, you might never know who this person is. And that works because a lot of people will still love your book and still talk about them. And there'll be the things we discuss in book clubs and things like that. So I would say, yes, like it will help. I don't think it will never like not help if an author is out there and upfront, but I don't think it's like inherently damaging. Like if you're thinking of publishing a book that you need 100% to be on social media, if that's not your vibe. Because like Nikki was saying, you don't want to be like boisterous on social media and then they meet you in person and it's very different. And then people are like, are they faking it? And that would harm more than it does any good. So I will say it's very interesting, but to each their own.
Just to expand on that, yeah, I 100% agree with what Nikki and Mo have said. And I feel like this is where the role as a marketer comes in, because you need to now understand the personality of the person you're working with and how you want to present them, right? I'll give you an example. We have had an author we published recently, debut author. He was just excited to do anything that I sent to him. First, we started with a blog post about, we called it like behind the story, like behind the scenes, like what inspired the story, how did he go about writing it? And the blog post did really well. And because it did well and he was excited to do it, I brought more opportunities like that for him, like asking him to write to our newsletter community. He loved it. Asking him to write to our bookstores community, just encouraging them to stock his book. He was happy to do it. He's also very active on Twitter, which helps because every time he posts just one line, everyone will just go ham on it. Because people also wanted to rally around him as a debut author. But on the other hand, we had another author last year and he put out his book, great book. It was well received and I brought an opportunity for him to write just a little bit, just zooming in on one of the themes in the book. And he's like, no, I don't want to do it. Like, he didn't even give me a reason. He's just like, I don't want to do it. And I said, fine, you can't push it that way. But then when an opportunity came for a podcast interview, he was so happy to do it. He flourished so well on that podcast. And for me, that was definitely my cue to like seek out more opportunities like that for him. So sending more pitches to podcasts that I think he'll be a good guest on. So it's important to now, this is now your role as a marketing person to think about how you want to present this personality to potential audiences.
Great, really nicely put. And I think, so being author relationships are a really important part of digital marketing too. So as an editor, I have to have that relationship with my author as with the editorial process, and then I hand them over to Rhoda or whoever's doing marketing, and they have to develop a really personal relationship with the author, so the author can trust that they're giving them opportunities that they're comfortable with and that you have to back. So that's another important trait that you need to be working on as you're looking to work in that space as well. We're running out of time, so I'll just give you one final question to everybody. Are there any recommendations you can make to somebody who's trying to get into aspiring public professionals or somebody who's trying to grow their presence in the bookstagram scene? Any resources you're aware of, workshops, anything like that? So final bit of advice for everybody who's listening.
I'll say take advantage of resources available online. YouTube, is a whole university. There's so much you can learn on there in terms of digital marketing tools, skills. Google has an entire, I think it's called Google Digital Academy. So there's a lot of stuff on there you can learn, from SEO to what the platforms are doing, are changing as they come, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. So take advantage of resources that are available online. there are also like digital marketing communities that you can join and just share information and take stuff on. Yeah.
I think what I'll add to that, I think everything is true. Like, do your research into the platforms, pay attention and those things. But I'll also say, like, be yourself. Don't do things that you're not comfortable doing. Like, if there's a trend going on and you're like, that doesn't feel like very natural for me, I feel awkward, like, don't feel like you have to do it. What most people gravitate towards, at least like in the TikTok space, is people who are authentic. Like, when people can be like, oh, when they want to feel like they really know you, and the only way they can feel that is if you are being true to yourself. So don't try and like put up like a persona. Like, if you're not a very loud person, don't think you have to be like one of those like, hey guys, and doing all those things. Like you don't have to do that. You'll find your audience, and then when you find your audience, other people will join, and just be yourself.
Yeah, and the thing with trends is they come and they go. So if you're constantly chasing them, then you're actually ever building up that authentic personality that people are drawn to. So that's really good advice. Thank you, Noah. Nikki?
Yeah, definitely everything that's been said, but I will add that I'm a student of like my colleagues. So I look at other marketing campaigns that I love. So if someone's done a cover reveal video that I just really responded to, I look at it, I go, what did I like about this? What did I like about the copy? So, and because I know sometimes courses cost money or there's an access issue, but if there's something you like that you saw in the digital space, you saw just an asset, you saw a copy, you read a newsletter, think about what you liked about it. Think about, if I was going to recreate this for another book, and sometimes you're just going to practice and do that right and say, what do I like about it, and then trying out for yourself and testing and making mistakes. And it's, you have tools like Canva, which is free, because sometimes in digital marketing, you're going to have to get into design. So make mistakes there, practice. You can start writing your own self, even if it's a newsletter you only send to yourself, create that newsletter, write, be like, how do I play with language? How do I take this book and write 5 different types of newsletters about it? What did I like about it? Send it to a friend and be like, I just want feedback if you have that. Send it to a mentor if you do. So a lot of the work, that will challenge you, what people work in the industry are doing. And I find that, I see some campaigns and I go, oh my God, I wish I thought about that. And I'm like, why are you so envious of this campaign? And then I look at it, and I think obviously because I'm within the industry, I get the chance sometimes to ask people like 2 years after to send me the campaign plan they had and be like, I studied that campaign plan. I go, that was really interesting. And they you can see what worked and what failed. It's always just very interesting to just see, how people think through a book and what was executed, and what you think was successful in terms of numbers might not always be that. So again, those are insights you get after the fact, but be a student who's working in the industry at the moment, and also then, take the things you like and practice. For anyone who's sort of, very much like in the email marketing space, I think it's called the Modern Museum of Emails, and they show you like all the templates of like really good email marketing campaigns that have ever gone out. And it's just a good place to look at how people laid out design, what kind of text they use, what kind of headings they use. So that's a really good tool to use. And as I said, things like Canva are great for you to just practice like design in terms of like, if I had to announce an author event, how would I lay out on this page? If I had to, announce a book, if I had to just do a social media asset for the book, how can I use this? And you can, use that to play around with. YouTube obviously is always a great thing to just listen to people talk about aspects of their career. I think that's always really great, but also go to literary festivals or go to literary book fairs around you, because that's just a networking space. Just ask, oh, how did you get into this industry? What did you use? What did you learn? Because learning pathways are going to be different based on your region, and it's very good for you to start, from where you are, because I think growing from where you're most and I would say knowledgeable, because the culture of that space is always a really good place. We don't always have to grow from adversity, and I think home is a great place to grow from, and I will always champion that for everyone. So go to any literary events around you and ask questions. And I think people are always scared of asking the wrong question. And I found, as someone, I said, I started working in the industry, just going to things. I found that asking the stupid questions got me great answers, because people are just like, I see that you're asking from a place of desire to learn. And I think maybe more people see that. The publishing industry, as much as we talk about it being very, white or whatever, I feel like the Black people, we rally for each other. And I am someone who's a testament to Black people rallying for me in this industry and continuing to. And so I'd say go to where your people are, and you see like there is a community that's ready for you to join us and really be a part of growing our network, but also our impact in the industry.
Amazing, thank you, Nikki. I think, yeah, everyone who's here now, you're clearly already on that right path. You're taking time out to listen to a talk about how to get into publishing. And that's all you can really do is look for those resources that exist. And I think you made a great point, Nikki, about not reinventing the wheel. What are people already doing? How can I adapt that? Those Canva templates have saved my life many times when I've had to design something, so it's not always about trying to start things from scratch, and you're not alone in these things. There's people doing it out there, so find that network, whether it's on Bookstagram or in the real world too. So I think we're going to wrap up now. So I just want to thank you, all the panelists, Rhoda, Nikki, and Moa, for a great discussion. I hope you've gained something from it too, listeners. And so thank you for joining us. We're delighted to have you here. This is the 4th panel we've done now in this series, and there's one final one left on design, sales, and sales and marketing. And so we've done digital marketing, this will be other kinds of marketing, and that'll be happening next week on the 25th of October at the same time. So please set a reminder, join us. It will also be up on YouTube if you can't make it. You can check out the rest of our schedule on our website, on social media. And then, as I mentioned before, the internship is also open for applications now. So please do join it. That's another great way to get involved. If you have any further questions, please look on to send us, use the hashtag Black Publishing Online, send us a DM. We're free to answer. Moa has sent her book talk on there, so check it out as well. So thank you all. Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye,
Yeah,
everyone.
guys.